Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's best and worst minor aliens of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So in this video I'm going to name off what I think are the top 10 best minor aliens and the top 5 worst minor aliens. Now what do I mean by minor aliens? I mean by aliens that appeared in Star Trek Deep Space Nine that we have some sense of their culture and who they are, but not the major recurring ones, because I didn't want to do the major recurring ones or include them on the list because they would dominate the list. Because of course everyone loves the Cardassians and the Romulans were used very well. Dominion is awesome. That's obvious. I want to get beyond the obvious and cover some of these aliens who not talked about them as much, and focus more on them and say like, well, which ones did I like, which ones did I not like. Now this video is continuing on my coverage of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I had just recently done, I covered every single episode of Deep Space Nine, one season at a time. So this video is sort of a continuation of that. I'm more of making this for, you know, the fans of my channel, the viewers who have watched my other reviews of the seasons of Deep Space Nine. It's not really being made for like a casual viewer. So what I mean by that is I'm not going to try to make this succinct. I'm not going to try to make it short. This is probably going to be a really long video with me rambling a lot. I'm not using a script or anything like that. If you don't like that, then off you go. You don't want to hear you complain about it. You have been forewarned. This is more of just, you know, wrapping up my coverage of Deep Space Nine for those who want to hear my long, drawn-out thoughts on Deep Space Nine. Anyway, usually, because I've done a couple of shows now where I covered every single episode one season at a time. I did Voyager, then I did Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, and then Deep Space Nine. So at the end of each of those, I do a best episode and a worst episodes list. But then I also do another like countdown. But it's going to be different for every show. Like for Voyager, I ranked all 7 seasons. And for Babylon 5, I did best and worst characters. For Deep Space Nine, I almost wanted to do seasons again, but I thought I want to mix it up and make it different. And, you know, if you watch my reviews of the season of Deep Space Nine, you pretty much know the order of which I prefer the seasons. I like season 6 the best, and then season 3, then season 7, then season 4, and then season 5, then season 2, then season 1. Pretty simple. Anyway, so I didn't want to bother with that. So I thought, yeah, let's tackle the aliens. But instead of like saying, oh, the Cardassians are awesome, no shit. I wanted to get into some of these minor aliens that we haven't really examined or talked about much. So first let me start with the list of which aliens are not included. They are not eligible for this list because they're too major. So first of all, we got the Bajorans, because that's all Deep Space Nine is all about. The Cardassians, the Klingons, the Romulans, the Ferengi, the Jem'Hadar, the Vorta, the Changelings, all the Dominion, humans, which is not really an alien, but whatever, and Vulcans. Now, I'm not saying that I'm excluding all Federation members. And also, I almost called this list like one-off aliens, because a lot of the aliens on my list are one-off aliens, meaning they only appeared in one episode, but not all of them. There are a couple that appeared in several episodes, some that appeared in quite a few, but it's still not enough for me to be considered them major. But as I said, all the aliens, in order to be eligible for my list, we had to have some sense of their culture and what the aliens are like, even if they only appeared in one episode. So that will exclude these random aliens that just popped up in the background, like quarks, or who, that one alien dude who tried to assassinate Garrick with poison. I don't even know what his species was. And, like the Gersari or the Euridians or stuff like that, because they're too vague. I don't really get a handle on what their alien's like. And yeah, whatever the hell Morn is too, like that doesn't count. I need to have a stronger sense of so if they're one-off aliens, and the episode tends to focus on that alien so we learn about it. If it's just some random alien in the background sitting at Quarks, or like being a mercenary or whatever, we don't really know anything about them. They're just being an alien just so it can be more exotic. Anyway, so let me just go ahead and jump into my list. So let me start with the top 5 worst aliens. And the worst minor aliens. Now, first, alright, so these are the ones I did not think worked. And were not very good. So let me start with number 5, the Kellerun and the Talani. Who the hell are they? Well, if you remember that season 2 episode, the Armageddon game, I don't know if you do remember, because it's so forgettable. I didn't remember that episode, and no matter how many times I see it, I always forget about what happens in it. But basically, it had these 2 aliens who, they were kind of generic. They were in a conflict, and they ended their war, and they destroyed all the weapons of mass destruction. They wanted to kill Bashir and O'Brien because they knew how to recreate it, because they wanted to wipe out all evidence of its existence. And those aliens are stupid. I'm sorry. They're like generic, like, bad guy aliens, and they're being very obtuse, and they didn't make any sense for wanting to kill O'Brien and Bashir, and that episode was just so forgettable. So anyway, they're my number 5. Number 4 are the I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. It's been a while since I've seen this episode. The Adanian, the Adenians, I don't know, whatever the hell they called, from the episode A Simple Investigation. Now, I did like that episode, A Simple Investigation. It's the one where Odo falls in love with this criminal, but it turns out she's actually a undercover operative trying to infiltrate the Orion Syndicate, and she's from a race of aliens, the Edian, whatever the fuck they're called, and you see the other dudes show up, and they wear like a cloak, and they have a bumper on their heads. Of course, she didn't at first, because she didn't know she was one of them until the end of the episode. And these aliens are kind of boring. They seem like super religious, but not, but they're undercover operatives, and I don't know, like, I didn't really like these guys. So anyway, let me move to my number 3, the Tavanians, I think that's called. So this is from an episode that is going to appear again on my worst list. An episode I loathe with a passion, and that is The Muse. Now, I want to make one thing clear, though, is I'm not judging the episode the aliens appear in, because, as I said, I like The Simple Investigation. I just didn't like those aliens. So it doesn't, just because the episode's bad doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to end up on this list. And likely just because an alien's on this list doesn't mean I don't like the episode they're from. But if an episode's so terrible, it does make it more likely I'm not going to like the alien that they introduce. So this, can't stand this episode. So this is the aliens that Lwaxana Troi marries. She marries one of them, and they're like super like religious, and they think like if they're very, I don't know if sexist is the term, but they're very genderist. Like, they're like, if a male baby is born and the father has all the rights and the mother has no rights. And if a female baby is born and the mother has all the rights and the father has no rights. And I don't know. First of all, this alien is very convenient for the plot. And its culture was just shaped around this stupid plot of Lwaxana have to marry Odo to get the other guy and the other guy made Odo like say this, speech because his culture says that the alien they can challenge a marriage if they don't think it's sincere, and so Odo gives a loving speech, and the alien guy is just like, "Oh, you're totally right. You do love her, so I'm gonna fuck off now," which is not realistic at all. I don't buy these aliens. They're stupid. This whole episode's stupid. The whole appearance is stupid. It's plot convenience for a horrible episode. Anyway, let's get into my number 2, which are the Ryzians, from Ryza. So, I guess they kind of appeared in the Captain's Holiday and the Next Generation, but Deep Space Nine gave them more of a name and more of a culture and focused on them more and explained the background of Ryza, and it's in that episode, again, a really bad episode, Let He Who Is Without Sin, and they kind of sucked. I wasn't really buying them that their planet was like apparently rainy all the time, but they were using artificial weather environmental controls in order to make it sunny and pleasant so that tourists will come. So how do they feed the plants if it never rains on rice? I don't. And why would they choose like a planet that's like rainy to make it I don't know. And these aliens in particular, like they have the thing with the Horgon or whatever, they just go around having sex with everyone. It's again it was too plot convenient for the plot. It's like, oh, let's have this perfect paradise. What about, surely there's some ugly Ryzians, and maybe there's some that don't really want to have sex with tourists all the time. I don't know. Or not sex, sorry. It's Dramaharum, which is, just a fucking euphemism for sex. But anyway. Or some sort of sexual act. They're always vague because they want to leave it up to your imagination. So this is stupid. The whole thing is stupid. Fuck the Ryzians. Which is kind of ironic saying that. Anyway, let's move on to my number 1 worst minor alien on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and that is, again, I don't know if I can pronounce this correctly, the Helenians. Halananan, whatever the fuck they're called. So they're from the episode Second Sight. This is another episode you might be like, what the fuck episode is that? Because it's another really forgettable episode that, like, no matter how many times I saw it, I was like, wait, what is that episode? I don't remember watching it because it just erases itself from your mind because it's so forgettable. So, it's a season 2 episode where Sisko falls in love with this girl, and I use that term very lightly because he sees her for like 5 minutes and determines he's in love with her. And she turns out to be an illusion from this woman who's from the species Halananan or whatever they're called, and she's married to this really pompous old dude who's some sort of scientist. Oh, he's a terraformer. He's very arrogant and annoying, and I don't like him. And anyway, so she's unhappy in her marriage, and so she's telepathic, and so she unconsciously, like she's not even aware of this, she creates an alter ego of her who can go out and have fun and have casual sex, I guess, with random people, and Sisko falls in love with her. Now, you might be saying, well, why, what's so bad about this alien species? Why are they your number 1 worst? Well, I talked about this in this episode, that, so apparently, because when they found out, I don't know, this was done for plot convenience, but it makes this alien race so horrible. So when they find out that, you know, it's the wife who's doing this, and it's killing her, by the way, her projecting this other personality is killing her, so eventually she's gonna die from this. And so the obvious solution, well, why don't you just leave your husband? Why don't you just get a divorce and move on with your life? And the husband explains, no, this alien species, the Halananan, or whatever they're called, they mate for life. They can't divorce. Okay, so this is either really piss poor biology or really piss poor society rules, because they didn't explain specifically is what he meant by they made for life. Does that mean that biologically they can't have a different husband or else they'll die? Because I don't really see how that would make any sense or how that would work. I doubt it, so I think it's more likely it's a society rule that society says that you're not allowed to get a divorce. So either way, if someone's unhappy in their marriage, it causes them to create this illusion that kills them. And society or biology, whichever one you want to say, tells them that they can't leave their marriage, even if it kills them. That's bullshit. I know it was done for plot convenience, just so they could have that terraformer arrogant guy kill himself to free his wife so she doesn't have to die, but that's bullshit. Why, if being in an unhappy marriage literally means death, and any society that says, oh, fuck you, I'd rather you die than get a divorce, is one fucked up society. Now, if it's biology, then how the fuck did the species survive? It seems like this is a very weak species and the evolutionary process really fucked up here. So either way, this alien race is dumb. I don't buy them. It's stupid. It's done clearly just done for plot convenience, and they make no fucking sense whatsoever. So those are my 5 worst reoccurring aliens. So now let me get into my top 10 best. The best reoccurring aliens, or minor aliens, maybe not recurring, maybe they're just one-offs, as I said, but the best minor aliens, excluding all the ones, so the Cardassians, of course, would be at the top of this list, or the Romulans would be number 2, and maybe the Vorta would be number 3, the Changeling, or whatever. All those species I excluded would all take up the top 10, so that's why I excluded them. Except for humans, they're boring. Anyway, let's get into my top 10 minor aliens of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, starting with my number 10, the Prophets / wormhole aliens. Whichever term. A lot of people like to say prophets. I like to say wormhole aliens. I guess I'm more of a non-believer. But you might be saying to yourself, well, why are they only number 10? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because the writers completely retconned them and changed their nature, and they couldn't be consistent with who they were. And frankly, I like them better in the earlier seasons when they barely appeared. Because when they showed up, it was a huge deal. And plus, in the pilot episode, they made it clear that they were just some weird alien species that exist outside of space-time, and they have a totally different, relationship with time, or you could argue no relationship whatsoever, that they exist outside of linear time, and they don't understand corporeal life forms like humans or Bajorans or any of the other alien races we know in Star Trek. And so they send out these orbs to communicate with other aliens, but what they think other aliens are aliens like them, because they couldn't even they comprehend. They couldn't even fathom the possibility of the existence of aliens that exist in something called linear time, which is an alien concept to them that they have no understanding of, and it's very weird. And so when they first meet, people from like that, like the humans, their first reaction is to reject it, to be like they're dangerous, get rid of them, because it doesn't seem like a real life form to them. But eventually they learn to accept it. They make it like Sisko, which is why that premiere was so good, is that Sisko reaches out and does what Starfleet Federation does best, and makes them understand and offers peace, so then they can say, okay, we understand now, so we'll let you go through our little wormhole thingy. But that later in the later seasons, starting like in season 4 and then getting much, much worse in season 6 and 7, or season 5, 6, and 7 really, they get completely retconned to becoming deities who purposely look out over Bajor and want and sort of asked them or wanted them to be worshipped by Bajor. And then there's this fantasy-like conflict from the evil version of them called the Palrays, and they're fighting over who gets to have dominion over the wormhole. And they, and Sisko all of a sudden, before he was just like a diplomat who made peace, now all of a sudden he's this, religious fantasy like messiah called the emissary that's there to bring peace and defeat the evil. And you can see what I'm saying, because the first part of that was very Star Trek like, was very science fiction like. What they did in the later seasons was very fantasy. It was very Lord of the Rings ish. Wasn't really Star Trek like. Now you can come up with your fansplaining, your headcanon excuses to try to fit these two things. Like, of course, I've heard a lot of like people stretching their brains come out with like, well, in the first part they actually knew who Sisko was, and because they created him. Don't get me into that bullshit. And they knew who the Bajorans was. They were just pretending to not let them know what linear time. No, that's stupid. I mean, sure, you could say that, but it's stupid. Sorry, but it is. It is plain and simple, like Garak. They retconned the aliens and changed their nature because Deep Space Nine, the first 2 seasons, was done by different people. It was done by Michael Piller. It was done by different writers. And then, what's-his-face, Iron Stephen Barrett came in season 3. And later seasons, he became obsessed with making Deep Space Nine like a fantasy and turning Sisko into a god. He even said this in interviews, that he just wanted to make Sisko into a god, which was stupid. Sorry. So that did no other fansplaining in-universe excuses explains that. That's all it is. Writers changed their minds, so they took this really interesting sci-fi concept, which I actually loved, and turned it into a simplistic fantasy good versus evil nonsense. Now, that being said, I didn't totally hate the wormhole aliens or the prophets in later seasons, except for that part about them sending a prophet to make Sisko be born. That was fucking stupid. But and the conflict with Paul Race was a bit goofy too. But I kind of liked it. I thought it was okay. It's definitely a retcon. It definitely does not fit into how they portrayed in the first half. So you might be thinking to yourself now, well, if you don't like them so much, why are they on your list at all? Why aren't they on your worst list? I do still like them. I particularly, as I said, I loved their portrayal in the first 3 seasons. I thought, even though they barely appeared, but that was what made them so good, though, is that they barely appeared. When they started appearing more, they became less interesting. Kind of like the Borg. So I still liked them enough to make this list, but not enough to be much higher on it. Anyway, that was a very long explanation about this. So let me get in to my number 9, which are the screens. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this choice. The screens were the refugees, the alien refugees from the second season episode, Sanctuary. Some people found them really annoying, like that one guy who was that Boner from Growing Pains? Like, he was a bit annoying. But I like the concept of this, and I think the episode, they fumbled the ending a bit, and they didn't really deliver on the analogy of refugees, even though they tried. But I still like the concept of alien refugees from the Gamma Quadrant, and also, throw in some foreshadowing for the Dominion, because, well, they weren't refugees from the Dominion, they were refugees from this alien species that conquered them, but then the Dominion conquered that alien species, so then they were free. And that's kind of like what happens a lot with refugees, is that a dictator or evil foreign power comes and invades them, and they're slaves or they're living horrible existence, but then something happens to that dictator or that foreign power, something else happens to them to kind of fuck it up, and then they're free to go, but they can't stay there anymore because it's too crazy, so they have to seek shelter elsewhere. And I thought that was very interesting. It was a good concept. I think they were being very obtuse when they wouldn't just take Sisko's offer, because he gave them perfectly good planet to live on, Draylon 2. He kept saying it over and over again. Draylon 2, go to Draylon 2. Hey, there's always Draylon 2. And they kept ignoring him, and they wanted to go to Bajor, where it wasn't practical for them to go, so they're being a bit obtuse there. But I did like these species, even though, as I said, sometimes they were a bit annoying because apparently they smelled a lot. But I think that just added to the analogy of the refugees not being welcomed, and how really we should be more welcome to refugees. Like, Quark was being a bit despicable in this episode, so he's not always a great guy, particularly in the first couple seasons. But it did sort of highlight how difficult sometimes it is to be charitable, but how important it is. So anyway, let me get into my number 8, which are the Trill. Yeah, the Trill did appear quite a bit, but I decided to go ahead and include them on this list. Now, I know some people who really didn't like the concept of the Trill. I personally simply think they should have been called something else, because they're not the Trill. The Trill was this one-off alien from the Next Generation who were totally different than these guys. I think they originally were going to have them be these guys, but they just kept changing it, so by the time Deep Space Nine actually started, they bear no pretty much only very surface level resemblance to the actual Trill, so they should have came up with a different name. But leaving all that aside, I did find this a very fascinating concept, and I think it's pretty simple to understand that the way they work is that you got the symbiont, and every time the symbiont joins with someone else, they become a totally new person. Like, because the symbionts only make up sort of half of the personality, and it's a joining where they become a new personality, but they also bring with them the memories and experiences. The symbiont brings with them many memories and experiences of all their past hosts, and all the past hosts were, of course, different, because every time the symbiont does have its own personality and its own thinking, but every single time they go into a different person, that joining makes that personality completely different, because the host brings in their personality as well, and they become into, it's not like two different people like talking within your head or something. I think it's pretty understandable. It's a blending, a joining. I thought they did a good job explaining this. I'm not sure why some people have a hard time getting this, but anyway, I loved it. Some of the episodes with them were not very good. Some are a bit inconsistent, like the whole they have to have a ceremony to bring out the different past lives so they can talk to each other. That was a bit cheesy. But I thought they were interesting. I thought I liked the concept of Ezri Dax. I heard someone say they didn't like Ezri Dax. How do you not like Ezri Dax? I think that was a cool thing because the actress who played Jazzy didn't want to be on the show anymore, so I had to kill off the character, and it was such a good out. Hey, give the semi-out to someone else that's hire a new actress. I kind of like that. And it was good that we didn't focus on this species way too much. I think they just enriched the world of Deep Space Nine. So, yeah, I quite like these guys. Anyway, let's move over to my number 6 favorite minor alien, and that is the Rakari from Vortex. Now, you might be surprised. Oh, no, wait. I'm skipping 7. Put a pin on that. Let me get to my number 7. Actually, no, I'm going to change this. I'm going to make the Rakari my number 7. Fuck that. I already mentioned them. Plus, I think this other one should be higher than the Rakari. So, who the hell are the Rakari, you might be asking? Well, they're from this first season episode called Vortex. And basically, we met the one guy, and we met his daughter, and we met an official. So it was this dude who came on Deep Space Nine, and he was participating in this like heist with Quark in order to make money. And Odo arrested him because he thought he was an asshole, but he had this like little necklace that had a little changeling thingy, and he like lied and told Odo he knew where to find his people. And so they went to the Gamma Quadrant, and he was like, hey, let me take you to the people. And the whole time Odo thought he was full of shit, and it turns out he was right. He was full of shit. But he wanted to rescue his daughter, who was in stasis and was hidden. So basically this was a corrupt like dictatorship, authoritarian type government. And I can't remember what exactly he did, but it was something extremely minor, like stealing a chicken or whatever. And apparently their alien rule of law is that if someone commits a crime, they don't enforce the crime on you, they enforce the crime on your family, which is pretty fucked up. So they went to kill his family, and they mostly succeeded, but he managed to save his daughter, and he killed the security guard, so then he was an outlaw. And so he was like running from them, and he was managing to find the daughter. And it was interesting because when Sisko and I think Dax, or was it Kira, or was it O'Brien? I don't know. Somebody in Sisko went to that planet on the runabout and saying, oh, we had the prisoner, do you want to do relations? And they're like, no, I don't want to know who the fuck you are. I don't care about you. They're like isolationists. Just give us our prisoner back and go away. And so Federation, dictated that they had to just go ahead and do that then. So this is I'm not saying they're a bunch of assholes, basically. It's an authoritarian society, but it was interesting. It was an interesting concept, and it was interesting the way they explored this in just the one episode. Plus the one dude who was able to rescue, he seemed like a huge asshole, criminal type, but he was actually just trying to save his daughter's life, which I thought was pretty interesting. So anyway, let's get into my number 6, my actual number 6, which was number 7, but now it's number 6, because I think these guys are actually better, are the Dosai from the episode Rules of Acquisition. Now the Dosai, these guys are pretty cool. So if you remember, they're like red-faced, they're like really strong, like bodybuilder types, and it had the guy. I always call him like an Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator because I don't know if he's German or Austrian, but he reminds me a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he's nowhere near as big of a superstar. But he used to play the main like alien bad guy on the X-Files. He played actually Klingon over a Next Generation episode, Clag or Clang or whoever the fuck. The one, the Matter of Honor, the one when Riker went on board a Klingon ship, he played a Klingon there. And I've seen him pop up a lot. I think he actually might have been in Terminator. I think he was one of the dudes that the Terminator killed at the start of the movie. But anyway, so he played the Dosai, so they're like the red alien thingies, you know, these big muscle men, and they're like, so Quark, and they're from the Gamma Quadrant, and the Grand Zek sends Quark on a mission to do a Tullberry wine agreement. But really, you find out that Zek doesn't give a fuck about doing business with these guys. He just wants to get into the Dominion, which of course at this stage they don't know who the fuck the Dominion are. So they're trying to figure out who the Dominion are, and then the Dosai eventually lead them to the Commonwealth, who are a part of the Dominion, so the Ferengi can do business with them. But the Dosai themselves are shown as being very serious about profit. So they go to like this marketplace because they seem like very profit-based, kind of like the Ferengi, but they're almost like a mix between the Ferengi and the Klingon, which I think is a really interesting concept. Because Quark, they go to this marketplace, whatever, on their planet, and there's dudes just killing each other over bad negotiations, and they're like almost like Klingons, like headbutting and like beating each other up, and Quark has to like make a big deal and like throw shit over in order to get them to listen to him, and he risks being killed, quite frankly. So I think these guys made a lasting impression. And just this one episode, I think they were quite cool. So, let me get to my number 5 favorite minor alien from Deep Space Nine. That is the Breen. Now, the Breen, first, I don't know. I think the Breen, I think I heard were a running gag. Wherever, like, in Next Generation, when they wanted to mention, what kind of aliens have this, you know, in common, or what aliens use this weapon, or what aliens are in this sector. They always just say the Breen. They just throw them in there. It was almost like a running gag, like they thought they were never going to reveal who the Breen actually were, but then in season 4 of Deep Space Nine they did, and they were like, hey, let's just do, they even outright said this, that like, let's do the Princess Leia bounty hunter costume from Return of the Jedi. You know how she shows up at Jabba's palace in this fake bounty hunter costume, and then they basically stole that costume and made it for the Breen, and they just talk and go with the voice, and it's kind of like Chewie because they talk like, and then some people can understand them and talk to them like, yes, you're right. I mean, if they really had a universal translator, it should actually be speaking English, because that's how the universal translator works. It's not like a Chewie where only certain people, where they talk their own language but other people can understand them and speak back to them in English. Like, that never really worked for me, even with Chewie. So I thought that was kind of dumb. But these guys are interesting. They were very mysterious, particularly how at the end of season 7 of Deep Space Nine, they actually joined the Dominion, so they made them a kind of more important race, even though they weren't really established, but they were still mysterious. But they turned out to be quite formidable, that they had this weapon that could dampen. And I think that's pretty fascinating, that the Federation had no idea this weapon exists. And this is from an alien species that was there in the Alpha Quadrant all along. Like, they knew more about the Jem'Hadar and the founders, who were from the other side of the galaxy that had just met through the wormhole. They knew more about them than they knew about the species who had been in the Alpha Quadrant the whole time. They'd just been isolationists and never really encountered them. I think before that storyline, though, they were kind of portrayed as like a minor mercenary type alien race that doesn't really pop up or do anything and wasn't that powerful. But then all of a sudden they're powerful. But I kind of like that. I think that made them more interesting. Now, they're not higher on this list. They would be, because they're pretty awesome, but the line of dialogue in season 7 were because it had been like references like throughout Deep Space Nine about how cold Breen is, and that's why they wear the little suits, because they're refrigeration suits, because they have to, from a real ice world, and they have to live in like freezing temperatures. And I thought that was a fascinating concept. But then in season 7, they had this stupid line of dialogue where Wayne says, "Oh, that's actually a myth. Their ice world is actually, their world is quite pleasant. It's not an ice world." And then Damara's like, "Well, why do they wear the suits then?" And it's like, nobody knows. I'm sorry, but that's fucking stupid. I had to knock them down a couple of ranks because of that line, because that's dumb. Why are you going to do that? And I think it makes a lot more sense. I mean, they're trying to increase the mystery, ooh, but I think there's enough mystery around them. You don't need to say that they're lying and their suits are just there for show and they're not actually from Ice World. I think it's a lot more fucking interesting that if they're from an Ice World. And plus, you hear like people would make, conversational proverbial references to how cold Breen is. They'd be like, "Oh, your heart is colder than a Breen winter," or something like that. So why are they gonna say that? "Oh no, that's bullshit. The world's pleasant." Fuck off. That's stupid. As a more interesting concept to me to have an alien, because it makes them more alien, that's from a world that's like, say, negative 100 degrees Celsius is their normal way of living. That's an interesting concept. And to take that all away and be like, "Oh, they're just being mysterious," that's stupid. I'm sorry. But anyway, they were still cool. So, let me get into my number 4 favorite aliens is the Teplans. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it. The Teplans, from the episode The Quickening. Now, The Quickening is one of my favorite episodes, and that's maybe why they're this high on this list, because you didn't really explore this alien culture other than the fact that they were stricken with a plague, a genetically engineered plague from the Dominion, because they defied the Dominion, which in itself I think is an interesting concept. But I think the reason why these aliens turn up so high on the list is because you did explore their culture, at least what their culture became after the Quickening, or no, it wasn't. The Quickening was the final stage of the disease. The disease is called the Blight, I think, which is not a very original name for a disease. But anyway, the Blight had so much changed their culture and defined them. It's almost like the Vidians over in Voyager, which I also love. The Vidians, an interesting concept. But they were so stricken and like downtrodden that it's kind of they de-evolved. They lost their sort of technological advancement, and they all kind of give up, and they start to morph their culture to work with this disease. So they had assisted suicide was a very common practice, which I actually think is quite practical. I think Bashir shows up and he thumbs his nose at them and be like, "Oh, how dare you, actually kill someone when they could possibly live. You should be trying to defeat the disease." But I think he's being very obtuse. I think he's being arrogant, and this episode even points out that he's being arrogant and he's not looking at it from their perspective, because from their perspective, they live centuries with this disease, and they've just had to learn to accept the fact that they couldn't do anything about it, and that it actually, they've been swindled before by people promising cures, and they became suspicious of outsiders, which is understandable because they got burned, and they just learned to accept the fact that this was a normal part of their lives, and so they had ways to deal with it. That is, if someone's nearing the quickening when they're about to die, that they assist the suicide so they can die in peace without experience before they get into the final stages, which is extremely painful. And I love that. And I love the character of Trevian, who was very sympathetic. Like he he was doing this because he thought it was the best thing to do, and frankly, it was until Bashir showed up, and Bashir, in fact, couldn't cure them, and he was being arrogant. And a lot of people did die horrible deaths because he fucked up badly. So I think it's interesting that Bashir was not in the right. In fact, the Trevian actually had a point, but I loved how Bashir did eventually find a vaccine, and as soon as Trevian saw this, he wasn't being arrogant or whatever. He was like over the moon. He was beyond happy, beyond relieved, beyond grateful to Bashir for actually finding a vaccine that would cure the children, any children of this disease, so the next generation wouldn't have it. Like, to him, that was the best thing ever. And so that speaks very highly to his character. It speaks very highly of this alien race. I thought they were very interesting. Anyway, let me get into my number 3 favorite minor alien for Deep Space Nine. That is the Parada, who were from the season 2 episode Whispers, another one of my favorite episodes. The Parada were pretty interesting because apparently they were Parada. There was a civil war. There were Paradan rebels, and the Federation ended was like sort of trying to broker peace between them. But then the rebels got a hold of O'Brien and created a perfect replicant of him who actually thought he was O'Brien and sent him to sabotage the negotiations and kill. Or maybe it wasn't the rebels that did it. Maybe it was the other one because they wanted to make the rebels look bad. I can't remember. But either way, this is an interesting alien species. They looked cool. I think their design was pretty cool. And the concept of them was interesting, that they're able to create these perfect replicants of aliens they just met. Maybe a bit hard to believe, but really interesting in that they had this conflict that they were willing to, try to sabotage negotiations. I don't know. Don't have much to say about them. I just thought they were really cool. Anyway, let me get into my number 2, which are the Lethians. Now, the Lethians are arguably a species that kind of just showed up as a mercenary species and didn't appear that much. Like, didn't even have an episode that focused on them. But I think we learned enough about them for me to understand them and to think that they're really cool. Even though, like, they first appeared in that horrible episode. Again, this is what I'm saying. It's not judgment on the episode. It's judgment on the aliens. Because their first introduction was that horrible in an episode, which I want to talk about again shortly when I do my worst list. What the fuck? Distant Voices. Where Bashir is, growing old or whatever. But the Lethian, they have telepathic abilities, but their telepathic abilities are like, they're able to like rip things from people's minds. It's like almost, it's a attack where they can go and go, and I don't know if that's their only telepathic abilities. It seems like it is, because the next time we saw them, the Klingon, I don't know, that dude that Worf, Doros is the illegitimate son that Worf should have killed in season 5 of Next Generation. He hired a Lethian to rip this information about the Sword of Kahless from Coruscant. And I just think that's a very interesting concept. And I think, again, I like the design on these aliens. I think they're really cool, even if the 2 episodes they appeared in weren't that good. And especially that Distant Voices one. God, that episode sucked. And it turned out that the Lethian was kind of a punk ass because he just got arrested right away. And he seemed kind of dumb for going after Bashir and expecting him to sell illegal banned like medicine. Of course he's not going to do that, or illegal substance. Like, that's quite stupid of him. But I still like these dudes. I still think they're kind of menacing. I wish they would have been used more. I think it's an interesting concept. The whole telepathic attack and being able to rip. Because that's using telepathy differently. I think Star Trek in general tends to be a bit boring with their telepathy. They have like the Beta Zs. It's like, oh, I can sense your feelings. But, or the Vulcans who just, they have telepathy because Vulcans are awesome. They have to have all these alien abilities. It's too much. So I think the Lethians, and the fact that they're mostly just mercenaries and they're mostly just morons, but they still have this ability to like rip stuff from your head. I just thought that was really cool. Anyway, let's get into my number one favorite minor alien from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and that is Tosk. And if you want to get really technical, you could say Tosk / the Hunters, because really, the Hunters was an alien species, and they created the Tosk, they genetically engineered the Tosk so they could do their hunts. This was really cool. I like the concept. I actually would go as far to say that this was actually better than the Hirogen over on Voyager. Because I think this is executed better. I think this is more of an interesting concept. Although it was kind of, too much plot convenience that Tosk couldn't tell anyone about what he actually was until they found out for themselves. And then he could talk about it all he wanted to, apparently. That was just done for plot convenience, so they, so the audience wouldn't know what they were. But it's still a very interesting concept. I think the way it was executed was really fascinating. Like the fact that they actually love they don't want the hunt to stop. They love the fact that they're prey because that's what they're genetically engineered to do. And so you can make comparisons to like modern day game hunters. And how, they'll go to a safari or like a sanctuary where the lions are like raised to be tamed and kill them because they want to be badasses. Although I guess that's kind of the opposite here, because here they purposely engineer the Tosk to be deadly, to be very impossible to kill and to fight back, basically. So their own lives at risk, but they love it. It's like what their whole culture is based on it, and it's kind of like the Predators a bit, except instead of going to Earth and just hunting humans, they actually engineer prey to be the perfect prey, which makes it, I can see how it makes it more rewarding if they actually do, rather than just hunting lions in the zoo or humans who are, how the fuck are they gonna fight back against a predator? They actually have a good challenge, an equal sort of challenge that makes it very threatening. And I love how they didn't understand, the hunters anyway, they didn't understand Sisko's reaction to why he was trying to interfere and what issue he had with it. Oh yeah, because Sisko called it abuse, and he's like, that's not abuse. Tosk love being Tosk, and he's right. They do, and like Tosk, he didn't want to ask for asylum to the Federation because he wanted to be in the hunt until eventually he died with honor. That was the whole purpose in his life, and the bond that he formed with O'Brien, I think, was done extremely well. It was very fascinating. I think it was one of the highlights of season 1, and I wish that the later seasons would have continued more with these weird aliens from the Gamma Quadrant. I'm actually sad that they gave this up. So yeah, that is my favorite alien species from Deep Space Nine, the Tosk. Anyway, that is it for my best and worst minor aliens. I guess this video didn't go on for that long, but just wait for my best and worst episode list. Those are the videos going to be extremely long. So I'm doing top 50 best episodes of Deep Space Nine and top 30 worst episodes of Deep Space Nine. So be sure to be on the lookout on that. And I know some people, I throw these disclaimers up every time. People just ignore the disclaimers and bitch about how the show that I'm doing, the worst episode list, is perfect, and I'm such a dumbass for thinking any episode would be bad. But that's obtuse. That's That's ridiculous. Every episode, even Deep Space Nine, which I had said in the past is my favorite TV show of all time, every show has bad episodes. And Deep Space Nine is no exception. So, I will be covering the 30 worst episodes and the 50 best, because there's more good episodes than there are bad episodes. So that's why it's 50 over 30. But anyway, be sure to check it out. Check out my channel. And many more Star Trek videos and many other reviews and other shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Lost, and more. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.